Hello, welcome to this CBT anxiety course. My name is Dr. Anyansi. I'm a psychiatrist. In this course, you will learn how cognitive behavioral therapy can help with your anxiety. You will learn some basic skills on how to deal with anxiety through challenging your thoughts and changing your behavior. This course will not be exhaustive, but I'm hoping that it will introduce you to some of the skills that you would need if you want to treat your anxiety without medications. So, let's start. Introduction. Cognitive Behavioral Therapy. What is CBT? Cognitive behavioral therapy is a type of psychotherapy that focuses on the here and now. It uses our knowledge that our feelings, thoughts, and behavior are connected and can influence each other. CBT is very much unlike most other therapies because it does not focus on the past. It emphasizes today and helps you to build skills for tomorrow. CBT can be used to treat disorders like anxiety, depression, insomnia, trauma, and grief, to mention just a few. In cognitive behavioral therapy, we talk about thoughts, behavior, and feelings being interconnected. Your thoughts can be, I'm not good enough, everyone hates me, no one loves me, or if you had OCD, you might think my hands are full of germs, or you might think that everything is contaminated with germs. These thoughts can generate feelings like tingling in your extremities, lightheadedness, difficulty breathing or chest tightness, sometimes also fear and palpitations. When you have these thoughts, you may try to reduce the unwanted feelings that they cause by engaging in some behaviors like avoiding, counting, checking, or washing your hands multiple times. The last three behaviors are often seen in OCD, while the first behavior is often seen in social phobia. These behaviors may give you some temporary relief from negative feelings, but they won't make them go away. You might call these negative feelings anxiety. I call these thoughts automatic negative thoughts. And they are automatic because they show up even when you don't want them. CBT aims to teach you how to get rid of these automatic negative thoughts by challenging them and hopefully replace them with more realistic thoughts. Oftentimes, it is easier to change your behavior than to change how you think. CBT will teach you how, by changing your behavior, you can change how you think. Let's start with lesson 1. What is anxiety? Now, take pen and paper and write down how you feel when you are anxious. Try to use only a word or two to describe what it means to you. When you finish writing, we can move to the next slide. I'll give you a few minutes. You may have written words like scared, worried, terrified, or tremulous, shaking, or jittery, which is often some of the feelings that you'd have when you are anxious. You are right. When you are anxious, you manifest certain symptoms that might make you feel worried. Some symptoms that you might manifest might include nausea, headaches, racing heart. Sometimes you might feel dizzy, you might have difficulty breathing, you might feel chronically fatigued, you might feel restless, or even have chest pain. Sometimes these symptoms might make you think you have a medical emergency, but oftentimes it's just your body giving you false signals that makes you feel you are anxious. Feelings or emotions aren't always bad. In fact, they are a normal response to potential threats from your environment. When you feel anxious, take time to notice how your body reacts. Notice how you feel by bringing your attention to your body. When does it become a disorder? Now, as you heard earlier, when you are anxious, it might actually be a normal response of your body to threats in your environment. But when this response continues in the absence of real threats, it then becomes a disorder. When there is impairment in your personal and social functioning, you might then be said to have a disorder. This slide shows some of the potential outcomes from having normal anxiety against having a disorder. When it is normal, it's a normal reaction to stress or difficult times. When it's a disorder, it becomes intense or overblown and becomes ongoing for weeks and months. And like I said earlier, interferes with your day-to-day life. Now, let's practice breathing exercises. Oftentimes, when you are anxious, you might wonder, what do I do in emergencies? How do I stave off this feeling I have when I'm anxious? Now, taking breaths is normal and natural. You don't have to bring it with you. It's already with you everywhere you go. So breathing is easy to use to ground yourself when you're anxious. So let's practice how to breathe in anxiety. Take a deep breath slowly through your nose. Hold it for 2 seconds. Then exhale slowly through your open mouth. Notice your chest rising as you inhale and falling as you exhale. Pay attention to your body after 2 quick breaths. Feel your heart beating by placing your finger over your radial pulse. This exercise can help ground you when in a panic attack by bringing your attention to your body. Taking deep breaths and noticing how your body feels is a quick way to quieten your anxious thoughts. It helps to switch off your fight or flight response. You might ask yourself, where do feelings come from? Your feelings are triggered by chemicals released at your nerve endings or synapses. These chemicals include dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, cortisol. And these chemicals act on your heart, blood vessels, your stomach, intestines, muscles, and other organs in preparation for your fight or flight response. Norepinephrine increases blood flow to the vital organs and muscles. Cortisol mobilizes glucose, which your body converts to energy. Dopamine helps keep your attention focused on the goal at hand, which might be to find nearest exit. Now, all these chemicals are essential for your survival. But when you are in a chronic state of panic, and these chemicals are in your blood constantly, they can actually harm your body. Now, let's learn how we can distinguish thoughts from feelings. Now that you know where feelings come from, let's try and distinguish the thoughts from the feelings. Your thoughts can be described as your inner critic or inner voice. That voice may have come from your childhood. For example, the stories you were told, or from the present, the stories you tell yourself. Now let's do a thought exercise. Take pen and paper and write down the recurring thoughts or voices you have had in your head these last 2 weeks. It's important to let yourself write down freely whatever comes to your mind. Draw a table like the one below. One column should read the stories you were told in your childhood or past. The other should read the stories you tell yourself today. Put your thoughts under the appropriate column. Now, if you're finished, notice how some of your thoughts appear in both columns. Can you see where your present day thoughts or voices come from? Perhaps from a critical parent or an abusive ex, or from a series of abusers in your life, or people who have judged you or even ignored you in the past. An example could be the stories that you were told in the past could be, you are stupid, you are fat, you are worthless, I hate you, you should kill yourself. Now, these stories may have come from people in your past like your abusive parents, an abusive ex. But today, you realize that you tell yourself the same stories. I'm stupid. I'm fat. I'm worthless. No one loves me. I should kill myself. These are called automatic negative thoughts, or ANTs. And these thoughts represent the outermost layer of your unconscious mind. Most activities in your day is carried out using your unconscious mind. For example, breathing, walking, and even sometimes driving a familiar route back home from work, for example. Your unconscious mind runs the show most of the time, which is why these automatic negative thoughts can seem to be present all the time, and they are quite hard to silence. They can be intrusive and sometimes scary, like when you have a sudden intrusive thought to drive your car off a cliff for no reason. You may have had other intrusive thoughts that are bizarre, which you know you don't want to act on. Well, you don't have to believe them or give them meaning. They're just thoughts. However, you shouldn't ignore them because they will keep nagging at you. They come from a deeper level of your unconscious self called your core belief. Now let's look at what we call core belief. Your core belief is the center of your being, or what makes you who you are. Your core belief is derived from your experiences in childhood. Those stories you are told by your parents, siblings, friends, and other people in your life who you value their opinions. If you had negative experiences in childhood, you'd have a negative core belief. If you had positive experiences, you grew up with a positive core belief. Let's try to understand our core belief using an example. Belinda was called fat and lazy by her mother. She was told by her mother that she was an accidental pregnancy and was never wanted. She could never please her mother and was told that she was useless. Her parents fought all the time, and she always felt like walking on eggshells at home. So, she grew up shy and had no self-confidence. Belinda's core belief was that she was useless and unwanted. Of course, this came from her parents' voices in her ear throughout her childhood. She was convinced that her parents' divorce was her fault. When she was sexually and emotionally abused by men in her life, she believed she deserved it because, again, she believed she was useless and didn't deserve to be loved. Your core belief affects how you view yourself and how you view the world around you. You might wonder, how do I change my core belief? In lesson 2, we will learn how to reframe your thoughts. The ultimate goal of CBT is really to change your core belief. When you change your core belief, you can eliminate those negative automatic thoughts or ants. Find your core belief by engaging in a dialogue with your inner critic or inner voice. Now let's practice an exercise. Confront and name your critic. Find a comfortable and quiet place to do this exercise. It could be a comfortable chair or a bed. Sit down and feel your body resting on that chair or on the bed. Take deep breaths in and out to ground you in the moment. Inhale slowly through your nose and out through your mouth. Imagine yourself in your safe place. Your safe place could be a place you've been to before and found peaceful. Keep breathing slowly in and out. Listen to your thoughts and identify your negative voices. Name these voices. For example, nagging Nancy. Ask these voices why they think you are useless or worthless, or whatever it is they say you are. Challenge them to show you evidence to support their claims. I'll give you an example. Nagging Nancy says you are useless. You ask, how am I useless? This is asking for evidence. She says, your husband left you. You reply, That doesn't make me useless. This is you challenging that voice. Naginasi says, you should have stayed with him. And you say, I refuse to be a doormat. He was physically and emotionally abusive. And I have been a good mother to my children. This is affirmation. So I'm not useless. This is you refuting the evidence. Let's look at some other common thinking errors that we also call cognitive distortions. When you are anxious, your thinking can become catastrophic or worst case scenario thinking, which makes you imagine the worst possible outcomes, like fainting in public, being laughed at by classmates or co-workers when giving a presentation or a speech. Other distortions could be jumping to conclusions without complete evidence, like when you think your co-workers are talking about you when you see them laughing from a distance. You have no evidence, but you believe that they are laughing at you. Other thinking errors may be when you minimize your achievements and magnify your failures. For example, you ignore the fact that you were able to graduate top of your class, even though you lived in a chaotic and toxic household, with your parents fighting, with drug use, with sexual abuse and physical abuse. You minimize your resilience and you magnify your failures. How can you correct catastrophic thinking, for example? You can do this by asking yourself, what is the worst that can happen? Imagine that scenario and allow yourself to live through the experience in your head. Compare your scenario with the worst possible outcome ever. When you do this, your worries will seem much smaller than you imagined them to be. Let's try this out in an example. For example, you are afraid that you will sweat profusely if you give a speech in public. Now, let's look at the worst case scenario. Tell yourself that the worst possible outcome is that you will shit your pants in public. Imagine how it will feel when you shit your pants in public. This will be far more embarrassing than sweating. And you know that you will never get that far. By comparing this worst case scenario with what you think might happen, you begin to allay your anxiety about sweating. Use this technique for any other situation that you find yourself in. Compare whatever you think would happen with the worst possible outcome. How to stop jumping to conclusions. Ask yourself, where is the evidence? If you can't find it, ignore the thought. For example, you thought your coworkers were laughing at you behind your back from a distance. If you can't hear them talking about you, then forget the thoughts. Ignore it. Don't manufacture evidence where it does not exist. How to stop minimizing or magnifying. If you are the kind of person who dwells on failures and ignores successes, it might be better to create for yourself a positive affirmations list to remind yourself of what you do well and drown out that inner critic that reminds you only of things you failed at. Place your list where you can see it every day, like on your mirror, in your bathroom, or even on your computer, and look at it every day. Now, let's look at some of the ways you can change your behavior in lesson 3. You can change your behavior by changing your thinking, but it's easier to change your behavior to change your thinking. If you are anxious, you might practice what we call avoidance, which provides short-term relief of symptoms, but it prolongs your anxiety. If you want to be less anxious, you have to break that cycle by immersing yourself in that fear situation. For example, in OCD behaviors, you may engage in compulsive rituals or behaviors to avoid anxiety. For example, hand washing, checking, or counting. In OCD, these intrusive thoughts will make you feel that if you don't engage in your compulsion, something terrible will happen, either to yourself or to your loved one. This, of course, will make you anxious, and therefore, you engage in your compulsive behaviors or rituals. You can attempt to prolong the time before you engage in those rituals and stay in the anxious state for as long as you can. You're not asking to not engage in the behavior. I'm asking you to prolong the interval before you actually engage in your compulsive ritual or behavior. With time, extinction of the behavior will occur if you continue to prolong the time from your obsession to your compulsion. An example, Sally has OCD. She has intrusive thoughts of contamination. Therefore, she washes her hands every time. She begins by touching a doorknob and then stops herself from washing her hands until 10 minutes elapse. The next time, she prolongs the interval until the compulsion to wash her hands is decoupled from her intrusive thoughts. This is a very good way to treat OCD by prolonging the time from your intrusive thoughts to your compulsive behavior. This is called exposure response prevention, or ERP. Exposure is the touching of the doorknob in Sally's case. Response prevention is when Sally prolongs the time between the touching of the knob and her washing her hands, or between the time that she has the intrusive thoughts of contamination to when she washes her hands. When Sally tries to not wash her hands, she can, of course, feel anxious, but she can use some certain exercises to help to allay her anxiety. She can take deep breaths, like we've learned before, slowly in and deeply, then slowly out. By taking deep breaths and allowing her anxious state to last for as long as she can, while she prolongs the interval between her intrusive thoughts and her compulsion, she begins to decouple her OCD circuit. If you have social anxiety disorder or social phobia, Oftentimes, your anxiety is triggered by social situations. The typical behavior is to avoid social situations. Unfortunately, the more you avoid, the more anxious you become. To break this cycle, you must expose yourself to that feared situation and experience the anxiety. Again, you can use some certain techniques to reduce the anxiety while you let it wash over you. You can use one, deep breathing, like we talked about before, or two, mindful activity, which I will explain shortly. Deep breathing. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose and exhale slowly through your open mouth. Feel the air going in through your nose and observe your chest rising as you inhale and falling as you exhale. Repeat this process as often as you need to, making sure you inhale deeply and exhale slowly. When anxious, we tend to breathe shallowly and quickly, which makes us dizzy from low oxygen to the brain. So by taking your breaths slowly and inhaling deeply, you ensure that you fill your lungs with air when you're anxious. Mindful activity. Being mindful means being in the present. When you are anxious, your mind often wanders to the future, thinking of worst case scenarios. By being mindful or mindfully active, you bring your mind to the present, focusing on what you are doing in the moment. These activities could be mindful eating, mindful walking, mindful driving, mindful shopping, etc. If you are shopping, focus on what you are buying. Read the labels on the items you're buying. Pick them up from the shelves and place them slowly in your trolley. Do it mindfully and ignore the people around you. If you do your shopping mindfully, you won't worry about people staring at you because you won't see them, because you are mindfully focused on the activity at hand. In summary, what you call anxiety can be a normal response. The meaning you attach to your thoughts or feelings is what makes you anxious. What you think is not always fact. So challenge your negative thoughts. By changing your behavior, you can correct your negative thinking. I hope that you've enjoyed this very brief course on CBT for anxiety. Please stay tuned for more courses on CBT for insomnia and also on DBT. Thank you for listening.